everybody, Blake T. Wild here, and welcome back to the Ultimate Era! You may remember that last episode was a helter-skelter, hectic time-jumping mess involving Venom in War of the Symbiotes. But at this point, we are now finally catching up to the broader Ultimate Marvel universe. You guys in the comments, you act like I don't have these videos planned out and what I'm gonna be doing. I'm covering Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm going all the way, baby. We're getting to Spider Home Base. But it is now time to witness the events of Ultimatum through the eyes of Peter Parker. Released in 2009, written by Brian Michael Bendis, with art by Stuart Immonen and David LaFuente, this is Ultimate Spider-Man Ultimatum. The book actually begins a few months in the past, before Midtown High is let out for their winter break, I suppose, because as has been previously established, Ultimates 3, which leads into Ultimatum, those both happen in late December. Ultimatum seemingly happens in the week between Christmas and New Year's. And how do I know this is happening before? Because they still have those Holmac babies. And they finished that project like 2 volumes ago. Peter and Mary Jane Watson lie in her bed as they share their love for one another. Mary brings up everything they've been through these past few years and how much she loves him and wonders if they should, you know. The next day, Midtown High, MJ and Peter are quite awkward around each other, and Kitty takes note and walks over to Peter with Kenny Kong McFarlane. She asks what that was all about, and Peter immediately tells her it was nothing. It was nothing. Nothing happened. Kitty asks if they broke up again, and Kenny wonders if everything's actually okay. But Peter assures them that they did not break up, and Kitty tells the boys that this is all rattling her faith in the concept of love. Peter pleads for Statler and Waldorf over here to stop talking and explains that he and MJ are fine. Everything is fine. Then his face flushes with embarrassment and he marches off. Later that afternoon, Spider-Man swings over the Queensboro Bridge and into NYC proper. And yeah, this is what LaFuente's Spider-Man looks like. I'm not personally a fan, and I don't think many people are. People definitely weren't when this book was getting released. And there is a reason that fans took to calling this era of Ultimate Spider-Man Basketball Head. Peter laments what happened when he hears the wee-woos of NYPD down below. He swings down and comes across a high-speed pursuit. Spidey lands atop the getaway car and discovers it's totally empty, aside from a lot of cash. So he smashes his way inside and takes the wheel. Or at least tries to. Then he notices a small device attached to the ignition and rips it out, and the car blasts off to 100 miles per hour. Somehow. In the middle of Manhattan. As the car rockets forward, Spidey climbs out and creates massive webbing across the street, but it doesn't hold, so he tries something else, which kinda works. He's launched up and away from the flying car and is narrowly able to catch it in a massive web. Then he walks over to the police, and the car explodes. The next day at the Midtown High journalism room, Jessica Jones goes over the robbery at the Union Bank in Brooklyn last night and Spider-Man's involvement with the car chase. One of the students asks why they, the closed-circuit school news group, are talking about this, and Jessica points out that it is technically school news because Spider-Man goes to their school. Then she proposes they work on figuring out who he is. Because just imagine their college transcripts if they deduce who Spider-Man is. And MJ quietly listens. Later at lunch, Peter sits at their usual table when MJ walks over and takes a seat as Kitty and Kong watch. She sits down and Peter thanks Her Highness for joining him. She tells him to shut up, and he asks what's wrong. Then MJ reveals Jessica's plan to get the entire news department to work on figuring out Spider-Man's identity, and MJ is freaking out because Jessica looked right at her when she said it. And Peter asks why MJ hasn't been talking to him. She tells him to move past that now. But Peter says no way, this is not something he wants to brush away. They need to work on whatever issues are going on. She asks what went on with the car chase, and Peter recounts to her the night. Some officers thank the Spider-Man for the help as passers-by grabbed the raining money. Then Captain Frank Quaid rocks up and officially introduces himself to Spider-Man. He's the cop that saved him from the Shocker, along with the help of Kitty Pryde not too long ago. Which means that issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, which Peter gets kidnapped by the Shocker and saved, which in release order comes out right before War of the Symbiotes, is actually set before Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, that volume of story arcs, but this annual by LaFuente and Bendis is set between the Shocker issue and his Amazing Friends volume. Why has this timeline become so muddied? Anyway, Spidey and Quaid talk, and he asks if Spider-Man has a couple of minutes to spare. So they head to the precinct, where a woman dressed like Spider-Woman from 616 Marvel shouts, "Embrace change!" Quaid speaks to Spidey in his office, along with an employee named Maggie. She's their tech support or something. Quaid tells Spider-Man that they had the security footage from the First Union Bank at 5:45 p.m., The officers arrive only 4 minutes later, and the getaway car takes off. The scene is cleared, but the actual robbery somehow happened after the getaway vehicle drove off. And Quaid reveals that this is the fourth time that this has happened at the hands of Mysterio. And he's asking for Spider-Man's help because the entire NYPD is at a total loss, and he doesn't want to lose his job because they might replace him with someone else because he can't bring in Mysterio. Back in the present, Peter finishes recounting his experiences to MJ, and she wonders if it was some kind of inside job, and Mysterio had help with the surveillance. And she gets up and marches away, assuring Peter that she'll help him solve this. And Peter calls out after her that he doesn't want her help to solve this, he wants her to talk to him about their problems. And later that night in Greenwich Village, a van arrives at a warehouse where Maggie from the NYPD, that's right, this all new character that was just introduced, is the bad guy. She meets with Mysterio in the warehouse, and he is enraged by Spider-Man's interference. She hands over the case, and Mysterio notes that they need to lie low for a while. Then Spider-Man smashes through a skylight, and Mysterio informs him he's breaking and entering. Spidey swings a punch, but it phases right through Mysterio's head, and Maggie runs for the exit when Frank Quaid leads NYPD SWAT into the building. Mysterio turns around and places a hand on Spider-Man's shoulder, and then the whole building begins blowing up. He slams Spidey against the wall and tells him that they're going to do their classic tete-a-tete when Mysterio is good and ready. Then he dissipates into a mist and vanishes. Quaid and Spidey lead everyone out of the building as it burns and arrest Maggie. Then Spidey tells Quaid that they're looking for a guy with a cloud for a head. And Frank sighs heavily. And that night, Mary Jane lies in bed and wakes up to see Peter at her window. She motions for him to come inside, and he climbs through and tells her she was right. It was an inside job. Mysterio did have help, like she said. And then he sits down and tells her that Mysterio is actually some weird headless horseman made of smoke or something who blew up his own base as soon as Spidey and the cops got there. Mary Jane says that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun, and Peter tells her that the cops did get the accomplice. Mary laughs and tells him that she told him so, and asks if he let the cops know that it was his genius girlfriend who figured it all out. Peter laughs and notes that he didn't get around to it, and she reminds him that she loves him. And Peter assures her that he knows, and he just wants to know why she got so crazy all of a sudden, and asks again to just talk about what happened between them. But MJ worries he'll be mad about what she proposed. And Peter realizes that she's mad at herself for even bringing it up, because now that it's been brought up, she's worried that it will keep coming up over and over again, and Peter will begin to resent her and eventually break up with her, just like Flash did to Liz Allen last school year. He asks if she really thinks that he's as bad as Flash. MJ obviously says no, and Peter asks if she really thinks that he would break up with her because she wants to wait to have sex. If she thinks, for one instance, that he would ever pressure her into doing something like that in the first place. She again says no, but notes that Peter wants to. And Peter smiles and tells her, duh! And she smiles and tells him that anytime he leaves her to be Spider-Man, it could be the last time she ever sees him. He says that that's really true for anyone, super or otherwise. And that's why he wants to marry her, so he can always be with her, because there will never be anyone like her. Until he remembered how pink her bedroom is, and he hopes that she changes that when they get older. She laughs and tells him to knock it off, and then they passionately kiss. A few months later, in the present, finally, and Johnny Storm once again tries to get out of a date with pop star Brittany Amber Fox. Johnny listens to her ramble on about their auras or whatever, and her agent performing analytics on how successful of a relationship with him would be. And Johnny realizes he has made a terrible mistake. Amber excuses herself to the ladies' room, and Johnny whips out his phone and calls Peter Parker, who's in the middle of kissing Mary Jane. He asks Peter to call him back in about 5 minutes because he needs to get out of this. MJ laughs that he needs to find a nice girl, and Johnny yells that they need to help him find a nice girl because he lives in a skyscraper with a super genius, his sister, and a guy made of rocks. Amber heads back and Johnny quickly hangs up. And meanwhile, At Midtown High, Gwen Stacy sits outside of the vice principal's office, and inside VP Sutras and May discuss the re-enrollment of Gwen Stacy. Sutras finishes reading a letter from a S.H.I.E.L.D. doctor regarding the state of Gwen, and another document of May Parker's guardianship of her, and yet another written by Tony Stark confirming the previous letters and his personal recommendation for May. And this doesn't really have anything to do with it. I always have assumed that this guy, Vice Principal Sutras, would be voiced or played by Wallace Shawn. Doesn't he just look like he would have that voice?
Yes.
Anyway, Sutras is suspicious about all this and asks how someone like May knows billionaire superhero Tony Stark. She informs him that Stark was simply involved in Gwen's predicament, and Sutras expresses how weird this all is. May tells him all he needs to do is let Gwen re-enroll back into school, continue her classes for the rest of this year and next, and let her graduate and get back to a normal life. Sutras tells her there's nothing normal about this school anymore. They have mutants, Spider-Man, the Osborns. Hell, he reveals to her pretty candidly that the school board and the district are voting to whether or not they should shut down Midtown High within the next few months. And he asks how he's supposed to explain a girl coming back from the dead to the faculty, let alone the parents. May corrects him that Gwen wasn't dead, it was just a clerical mistake, and that Gwen is a good, smart, and talented girl whose father was a policeman for the city who died in the line of duty protecting people, and she deserves every chance she can get. More than 5 minutes later, Peter makes some sandwiches and gives Johnny a call. Hey, so tomorrow how about we all head back into the city and meet up with you? Oh my god, Dr. Doom is back? Where? Yeah, so I'm thinking me, MJ, Kitty Pryde, Kenny, my friend Gwen. Does that sound good? I'm sorry, Amber. I've gotta go. Flame on! As the Human Torch soars over NYC, a building explodes, and a green figure soars past him, and Johnny gives chase to the Vulture. Vulture works on getting Human Torch to just give up and tosses some of his trademark exploding Vulture eggs. And a massive explosion blasts Johnny into a boardroom where Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson happen to be in a meeting at. Johnny catches himself midair and zooms back out into the sky after the Vulture. Vulture bobs and weaves through the streets with Torch hot on his tail feathers. Then Spider-Woman swings in and kicks Vulture and shouts that she's swinging here. Vulture plummets into a billboard in Times Square and Spider-Woman webs him up as Johnny retrieves whatever it was he stole. She says hi to Johnny, and Johnny asks if they've ever met before, and she tells him not to worry about it. Then she swings away as Johnny follows her. She tells him that they just have some mutual friends, that's all. Johnny keeps pestering her if she actually knows Spider-Man, and she says he's kinda her cousin. She keeps on swinging because this is getting awkward, and Johnny stops and says that she is girlfriend material. I ship it. I'm okay with it. That's just yet another piece of ruined potential for the Ultimate Universe. I think it would be pretty neat if Johnny Storm started dating Jessica Drew. But again, Jessica Drew, one of my favorite characters from the Ultimate Universe, just nothing was ever done with her of substance. And this could have been one of those things. Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., girlfriend of Johnny Storm, Human Torch. That would have been so cool. The next day in Forest Hills, Kitty Pryde and Kenny meet Peter, MJ, and Gwen at the Parker residence. Peter introduces Gwen to Kitty Pryde, and Gwen compliments Kenny on all the weight that he's lost since she last saw him. May tells him to be safe and stay inside as much as they can because it looks like it's going to start raining later. Then she tells them to have a nice time and enjoy themselves. And sometime later, she spots a police cruiser and an unmarked pull up on their street in front of her house, and watches as 2 detectives in 3 uniforms walk across her lawn. May heads out and meets Detectives Lambo and Rodriguez. She asks what this is all about, and Lambo asks for confirmation that she is Peter Parker's guardian and if he's at home. May tells them that he's out with some friends, and Lambo asks May to come back to the station with them to answer some questions about Peter Parker and her relationship to Spider-Man. And May Parker is escorted into a police cruiser as rain begins to fall. Later at the 103rd Precinct in Jamaica Hills, Queens, May is escorted through the busy station as detectives look for Captain Frank Quaid. Frank tells them he'll be right over to deal with this, and May is taken into the desolate interrogation room, where she sits, waiting, and waiting, and waiting for some time, until Detective Lambo enters, asks May some questions, and then May demands to call her lawyer. And then the detective asks why, because she's not under arrest. Then this fucking guy barges in and asks if she'd like to spend 25 years for aiding and abetting a fugitive of the law, because they know who Spider-Man is and that he's a fucking vigilante who rampages through the city, causes property damage out of the ass, and causes cases to get thrown out of court, and is some kind of fucking mutant. Probably. And Spider-Man has been around her house in Queens, Midtown High, and the vice principal of Midtown contacted the police about the note from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark. That's right, Sutra sold them out. But May gets in the guy's face and tells them that she doesn't know a goddamn thing and asks why she's getting arrested and wants her fucking lawyer, because May was a fucking pig-hating hippie along with Ben. Police get annoyed and prepare to argue back when a massive earthquake rumbles the building and all the power goes out. The detectives order May to stay where she is, and then they leave the room. Many minutes go by, and May cautiously gets up and heads out of the ajar door, and then she stumbles through the darkness, finding the precinct totally abandoned, except for this costume weirdo who was shouting earlier. The woman mumbles that it's all gone as she stares at May, and then May heads out of the doors and finds a beached ferry boat lying in ruined buildings along 168th Street. As the sky glooms death, sirens echo in a horrid mix with screams, and the world comes to an end. And in Manhattan, Peter Parker has escaped from the train car thanks to Kitty Pryde and is swinging through the city as another wave strikes. Peter panics as he tries to rationalize what he is supposed to do. He tries not to be sick in his mask as he spots a woman, swings down, and takes her up to a rooftop to safety. He dives back off the building as the voice of Charles Xavier echoes in his mind with a telepathic message of what is happening. Peter launches a taxi and it traps riders up and out and into a webbing as Professor X sends a telepathic image and message about Magneto and his citadel, urging whatever heroes remain to make their way to Westchester. The passenger of the taxi panics and screams that the driver is bleeding a lot, and she opens the door and plummets down into the waves. Spider-Man dives after her, and Jonah Jameson watches him save her life from his office in the Daily Bugle. Peter swims to the surface and runs her up the nearby building where he finds other survivors. Peter panics and tries to mentally call back out to Xavier, hoping he can somehow hear him or reach out to him again. And then he goes back for the taxi driver and desperately tries to not have a complete breakdown. Meanwhile, the nearby crowd of the train car turn against Kitty for being a mutant after she tells them that she'll have to phase them out one by one to get out of here. But then Gwen screams that she just offered to save their fat fucking lives and they better can the racist shit. Kitty holds out her hand, laments what she's about to say, and tells them to take her hand if they want to live. Back in Queens, May helps a young boy get away from the ship crash. His mother races over in a panic and grabs him. Then an explosion erupts nearby, killing them both and rocketing May across the street. Police and civilians alike continue to abandon the area as May spots Detective Lambeau lying on the ground. May helps her stand up after her leg was struck by debris when a telephone pole ruptures and begins to fall, but it's caught by the spectacular Spider-Woman. And later in Battery Park, Kitty has finally finished evacuating the entire train as people rush away in panic. Kenny shouts that they're welcome and hugs Kitty and thanks her. Gwen, however, begins crying and hugs MJ as she realizes that they would have been dead if they had gotten into the city any earlier. And then she worries about Peter, and MJ assures her that he'll be okay. Back in Queens, Spider-Woman lands, and May demands to know why she just called her Aunt May. Jessica sputters her words and assures her that she says, "Are you okay?" Not Aunt May. Who would ever say Aunt May? I said, "Are you okay?" She grabs May and then swings her away to a rooftop, assuring May that higher ground is what they need right now. But May ignores all of Spider-Woman's rambling because she has finally witnessed to the unending storm broiling over the entire city. The lightning and the thunder and the sprawling rain that brings utter death and destruction. She rationalizes that Spider-Woman must know Peter and tells her that she doesn't know how or care who she is. She just wants Spider-Woman to find Peter and bring him home because he is all that she has left. And Jessica assures her that she will and swings away towards the Queensboro Bridge for the city. Deep within the city, Peter rescues people when the Hulk arrives. And he just kind of stares at Spider-Man as Peter freaks out that the Hulk is here. He also hopes that calling the Hulk won't make him upset, and then realizes that he hasn't said anything in quite a while, and introduces himself and asks if Hulk knows where he is. Hulk simply mutters,
"Hulk wet."
Peter asks if he knows what happened, such as how the Hulk got wet, and Hulk informs him it was from the water. Peter asks if Hulk brought the water because they're all wet and the water killed people and hurt a lot, and Hulk just kind of stares as a deluge of rain batters the two. Spidey tells Hulk he needs to go and help some people and asks Hulk if he can help him and be his friend. And Hulk smiles and tells his little friend that he'll help, and Spidey leads him through the demolished city. A scream roars out from a nearby burning building, and Spidey swings up and creates a web line where Hulk is waiting to catch people at the ground. They eventually evacuate the survivors when someone points out another massive burning building with a subway car on top of it. So Hulk thunderclaps, and the blast rockets out and extinguishes the fire as the two run over, and Spider-Man climbs up to the train, but finds no one. And Peter clambers out and falls to the roof and laments what is he supposed to do during the end of the world. Then Spider-Man notices a veritable mass grave nearby, and he rushes over and uncovers the body of Daredevil. Peter gives a eulogy for Matt Murdock and removes his mask as Dr. Bruce Banner arrives and recognizes Murdock as his lawyer from his trial and asks what happened, where he is, and then he begins panicking, asking, believing that he did all of this. Peter assures him that he had nothing to do with it and pleads with him to please calm down. But Bruce hulks out, and Hulk smashes the building into two, and Spidey leaps away. He's trailed by the fucking Hulk down the ruined roads of NYC and eventually passes through Greenwich Village, where he spots something not good happening at the Sanctum Sanctorum, because the magical seal has been broken and a deluge of demons escape the building, blasting out of the roof. A half hour after the Midtown gang escape the train and the battery, Kitty helps Kenny climb up to a rooftop in Brooklyn, and they join Gwen and MJ as they look out over the total ruin of the city and witness a fantastic magenta vortex erupting from Greenwich. Kitty worries about Peter, and then MJ just fucking hits her to the ground, demanding to know why she sent him into the city and made him leave the train and her and them. Kitty calmly assures her that she didn't send him anywhere. He went into the city to do what he could because he is a superhero. And Kitty would have done the same if she could fly or swing around or get through the city quick enough. Mary falls to the ground against Gwen in an incoherent sobbing, and Kitty tells her that she'll find Peter, and then phases into the building and away. Flashback time! A few months ago, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange discussed their previous Knights-based escapades with Daredevil, who they both dislike, rightly so, I might add. Strange thanks Spider-Man for the help, and Spidey asks where he got all these crazy artifacts and magic stuff and all whatnot. Strange tells him that it was his father who did it, because his father, Stephen Strange Sr., was the true Sorcerer Supreme. Stephen Jr. just inherited it when his father disappeared. Stephen shows the young hero around, and they get to the Orb of Akmantata! Strange explains that it's a sort of doorway to the dark dimension. Strange continues that anything that doesn't belong on Earth or is a mystic threat to reality is in there. It's kind of like the Phantom Zone, I suppose. Then Wong suggests maybe not reveal all of this to a child, aka Spider-Man. But Strange assures him that Spider-Man's a cool dude. Spidey asks for assurance that all of this stuff is safe here in the middle of New York City, and Strange asks Wong to give him that assurance, and Wong explains about the ancient seal that protects the sanctum, and that both Wong and Strange carry spells on them at all times to make sure that if the window and the seal is broken, there's still a barrier. They also have a very expensive alarm system. Strange simply smiles and tells Spider-Man that it would take a veritable act of God to break this place. And in the present of the growing, seemingly endless night, Spidey watches as Hulk angrily smashes the magic, and he runs over and tries to calm him back down. A figure appears from the burning white Orb of Akmantata, and Peter excitedly calls out to Doctor Strange! And the hero and the Hulk watch as a nightmarish, grotesque form of a possessed Stephen Strange Jr. shambles towards them. Then the possessed Strange laughs as Nightmare recalls what a glorious host Spider-Man was for it, and then begins conjuring the nightmares of the Hulk, and a legion of shambling undead, all of those who the Hulk has killed, come for him. Spidey cries for Hulk to just run away, and that none of it's real, but Nightmare Strange suddenly emerges behind him, and the conjured villains of his own appear. Spidey gets his ass kicked as Hulk rampages from the legion of undead hoarding him, but he is overwhelmed and drawn into their mass.
And then Peter Parker wakes up because his alarm didn't work, and Uncle Ben tells him it's time to get ready for school. Peter gets dressed in his sweater vest and slacks and heads downstairs for some wheat cake breakfast. And Peter asks, "What is happening?" and looks up at the
undead Uncle Ben, who grimaces down on him and tells him that the right thing to do is to kill himself and just stop the tragedy for everyone else. Peter wakes up in a destroyed pizzeria as Nightmare Strange steps inside. Peter tells Nightmare to knock off this bullshit because there's nothing in his head worse than what reality is like. And Nightmare simply smiles, and the Goblin launches Peter out into the street where Carnage catches him. Sandman absorbs him in a hold as Electro unleashes his bolts, and Daredevil slams his batons into his face and tells Peter that all of this is his fault. And a glowing purple light emits as Nightmare, having finally harnessed enough nightmarish energy, forms itself a new body. Then he's grabbed by the Hulk, and the Hulk tears the creature in half, and its energy erupts. Nightmare reconstitutes and quickly runs away to the Orb of Akmantata. And Hulk gives chase and destroys the magical Orb of Akmantata. And a gargantuan explosion of magic erupts and rockets the area. Jessica's webbing ignites, and she plummets to a roof as the vortex rips into the sky above Greenwich Village. She gazes over the edge and watches as the magenta energy dissipates and hisses into the night rain. Then the Hulk erupts from beneath rubble, and he spots her and angrily gives chase. Jessica webs his face and escapes as SHIELD helicopters arrive at the scene. The choppers open fire and blast at the Hulk, but he grabs a nearby cab and sends it directly through two of the helicopters. The whirlybirds crash into an apartment building, and Hulk seemingly realizes what he's done and stops and watches as a third helicopter retreats. Then Jessica watches from around a corner as the Hulk leaps away into the city, and a legion of SHIELD response choppers begins soaring over New York. Jessica tries not to have a breakdown and pulls her mask back on. Then she looks over the ruins of the sanctum, lands, and looks around through the rubble, calling desperately out for Peter, and falls to the ground. Then Kitty Pryde arrives, and Jessica removes her mask and excitedly runs up to hug her, and Kitty phases through her, confused, and Jessica explains the situation, and then they spot people in a nearby building signaling for their help, and the girls race into action. Over an hour later, Kitty and Jessica work and continue rescuing as many people as they can and get them to the tallest point nearby. Eventually, they wrangle all the nearby survivors they can find as more SHIELD rescue choppers cut through the night sky. One lands and the survivors are picked up, and a woman runs over and hugs Jessica before she boards. And then the two head back down to the streets and continue searching for Peter Parker. Then another cresting deluge sprawls at them. Kitty phases through it as Jessica leaps away, and Kitty watches as the bodies and wreckage are carried through the waves. The girls call out once again, and then Kitty finds Peter's mask in the water. And many grueling hours later, Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, and Kenny Kong McFarlane have finally walked themselves home to Queens, where May and Mary's mother wait for them. And not long after, Kitty Pryde arrives, carrying Peter's mask. And May breaks down on the steps, and Kitty hands it over to Mary Jane Watson. The end. Hope you enjoyed this sad addition to Ultimate Spider-Man. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Of course, we know what really happens. We know this isn't actually the end of Ultimate Spider-Man. But hey, if you were reading this at the time that when it was coming out, did you? Because they were killing off people in the main Ultimatum book. So who's to say they wouldn't have killed off Ultimate Spider-Man here? I feel like this is a very well done, very high stakes, and just it's a great story that really emphasizes who Peter Parker is. He does good for the sake of doing good. He is a true hero. He inspires everyone around him, even those without powers he inspires to act and do better. And I do really like this volume and this issue. And it's, I like the soap opera aspects of it. I really like Mary Jane and Peter, they're teenagers. They're in high school. Obviously, sexual tensions are abound. They haven't done anything yet. And I do like that aspect because it adds a level of relatability. It adds a level of realism to it. It's my big issue with comics as they stand now is that those human aspects are just totally gone for the most part. There's no downtime anymore. There's no soap opera-esque subplots running about how this side character interacts with this person and the turmoil that this person's going through, and this person's going bankrupt and could lose their house. Meanwhile, the superhero's saving the day. It's stuff like that that really adds genuine interest to comic book stories, I think, rather than just it being purely, hey, look, big event! Look how shiny and explosive it is! Look at all the variant covers we have! If you want to find out what happened to all of the other heroes and characters of the Ultimate Universe during Ultimatum, make sure to check out my incredibly long video on Ultimatum if you haven't already. And this, of course, I almost forgot, is the official introduction of Ultimate Mysterio. It's a cool design. I do really like Ultimate Mysterio. And the characterization of him, even though, the big reveal, spoiler alert, is that Ultimate Mysterio is actually an android piloted by Earth 616, mainstream Marvel Mysterio, who has somehow figured out how to travel the multiverse and has made contact and transported these things to the alternate dimension to then run the gambit of being a criminal mastermind. I guess the money in both worlds is the same. It would have to be, right? Because why isn't... I don't think he treats it like a video game where I want to amass however much I can. If I remember correctly, I think he's sending stuff back to Earth 616. So the money would have to be the same. And I love the final issue, which is Ultimate Spider-Man 133, because it is a totally silent comic. There's no dialogue at all. It's just images. It's sequential storytelling. It's Stuart Immonen doing his most incredible work. I fucking love Stuart Immonen. I've said it in previous episodes about his Ultimate Spider-Man stuff. He gets expressions. He gets character design. It's so weird. It's just pure artistry. It's also Shell Shock the comic, because this comes after a massive explosion. This comes after Ultimatum, and it's just silence. You can hear that tinnitus ringing happening in Jessica's ears as she's chased by the Hulk, and then fucking just walks alone through the empty streets of ruined New York. Is all the only sound are distant sirens and screams, possibly, and thunder and lightning overhead, and the rain slamming hard against her. And she's just picking up rubble and checking and crying out for Peter. It's just a very well done emotional story. But of course, there are some general oddities of this, specifically the timeline. So the chronological timeline that I have set up over the course of the Ultimate Era, and that is involving Doctor Strange in this and in Ultimatum. So the only thing I think that makes sense is that the sanctum is destroyed. The seal is broken. Wong dies at this point, probably during the Ultimatum wave itself. Maybe he gets smashed by a car or something. Or the subsequently unleashed demons, but I think it might make more sense that Wong dies in that initial attack. It never comes up. Don't worry about Wong or his death or all the demons and ghosts and stuff that escaped, because magic just wasn't a big thing in the Ultimate Universe, the original one at least. So anyway, that happens. Then Stephen Strange Jr. is possessed by Nightmare once it escapes. This happens, this story. He is then freed as Nightmare amasses energy and creates its own form, and then runs back into the Orb of Akmantata. Spider-Man and all that happens, blah, blah, blah. Strange wakes up later, finds a desolate city, and then witnesses Dormammu escaping, finally. And he tries to fend off Dormammu himself. As we've established well, Doctor Strange is not a great magician. and he fucking is brutally murdered. And then Dormammu does some stupid shit with Johnny Storm trapped in his necklace or something. I cut that part out of the Ultimatum book. It's pointless, it's dumb, it doesn't make any sense. And also, here's something very pedantic. There's the whole issue of where the police precinct is, because the 103rd precinct is in the square middle of Queens, right? Which makes sense based on the Forest Hills location of Peter and the Parker's residence. But in reality, and based on what's shown, it seems like it's actually the 108th precinct, which is very close to the Queensboro Bridge. I know. It's a minute detail. It's dumb to think about, but when you have been spending so much time reading through, chronicling the Ultimate Marvel Universe, when you're looking at every little aspect of it, you simultaneously have a map of New York and Google Earth open to try and figure out where these things are taking place, like I do when I make these scripts. You start thinking about these things. You start to notice stuff. Maybe here's the most basic explanation. The 108th precinct in the Ultimate Marvel Universe is actually the 103rd precinct, and that's where Frank Quaid works, and that's where the detectives go, and that's I don't know. Some reason the names have switched. There you go. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. As always, check out my other videos of the Ultimate Era and my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey's videos, where you get early access to videos. All of my comics are posted on there as well, and my Etsy shop, blaketwild.etsy.com, where you can pick up the physical copies of my comics as well. Every purchase comes with a free head sketch of any character of your choosing. And check out my other channel, Smokey Save File, where I poorly play video games, and my podcasts. I Need Some Disney, where my Disney-obsessed wife and I discuss all things Disney, Comic Shtick Podcast, and our single episode, There's a Podcast in the Percolator, a Twin Peaks podcast. I will see you next time. Bye!